Welcome to Talkin Jets. This is episode 3 of our series. I am joined tonight with our panel. I got Green Bean, David, and Matt. We are going to be talking all things Jets, as well as some of the new NFL changes, potentially with the collective bargaining agreement. Guys, how are we doing tonight? Green Bean, I'll kick it to you first. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Ready to be here, man. It's a good night.
What about you, David?
One season has come to an end, and now I'm going into another season. Ready to talk some football tonight.
Solid. Matt, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. Excited to be here. Let's get into it, boys.
All right, good stuff. I want to get into a little bit of housekeeping first. First things off, if you guys have not checked out Matt's podcast, definitely go check that out. It has been very cool. As well as all the guys on the panel. Subscribe to their channels. They're all down below in the description. I didn't do my live stream yesterday, my call-in show. I had my bachelor party this past weekend, so I was a little tired out from that. Too many strippers and booze. But
I was thinking the exact same thing.
I'm ready and recharged, so I'm excited to have fun with you guys tonight. We're going to do our t-shirt giveaway on this show because I didn't do it yesterday. So for you guys that are in the chat, question of the day, if you do want to have a shot at winning a shirt or a hat or a mug or something like that from the Jets Talk store, head over to the Jets Discord. It's down in the description down below. The question of the day, which Jets wide receiver was the first NFL player to reach 10,000 receiving yards? If you head over to Discord, you can answer that. Head down to the poll section and enter your answer there. And we will go over that at the end of the show. I will announce who won. So make sure you check out the Discord server down below. All right, boys. Let's get right into it. We're going to start with our cut 'em or keep 'em. I'm going to list off a name. You guys are going to let us know if you would re-sign them. So what this is, it's not really, we're not cutting them. It's going to be basically the free agents that the Jets have. Do you want to keep them or do you want to just let them walk? Cut them or keep them just sounds a little bit nicer, as Green Bean so eloquently told me before we started this. So let's jump right into it. First one up, guys, Ryan Khalil. Keep him or let him go. Green Bean.
You got to keep Ryan Khalil. He's a stalwart, rock solid. If I never hear that name again, it'll be just fine.
David, what about you?
I'm letting him go. I mean, the dude's past his prime. He's old. And Jonathan Harrison is a younger option. Now, what we need to do at center is we need to bring in some competition for Jonathan Harrison, and an old bag like Ryan Khalil isn't that.
What about you, Matt? What are you thinking?
Goodbye. I hope I never hear his name again.
I'm on board with that. I think we can all agree that's probably pretty good. All right, next person on this list, left tackle Kelvin Beachum. Matt, I'll start with you. What are you thinking with Beachum?
I'm cutting him. I would like an upgrade. He's an okay left tackle. I think it's time for the Jets to get younger at that position and find your left tackle of the future in the draft.
What about you, David? I'll throw that to you.
This one's a little tougher. This one's a lot more tough. Personally, if you could get Beachum on a serviceable deal, especially with the market for these left tackles, I would actually consider bringing him back, especially since he's got that veteran presence on the offensive line, and he's a great leader in the locker room. But, however, if you could find a much more durable option, like a younger option, especially in the draft, then there's a good case that you could let him walk. I'm more in favor of letting him walk and going younger, but he's definitely a guy that I could bring back on a serviceable contract.
Green Bean, what about you?
Well, 3 years ago, when he was obviously 3 years younger, he signed for $8 million a year. So I think we can get him for at max $8 million a year, potentially lower. If that's the case, I keep him.
I'm on board with that. That's actually where I fall on this. I think we're going to need a left tackle. There's a few options available in free agency, but all of them are pretty old. Costanzo is pretty old. And then you also have Jason Peters, who Douglas has the connection with the Eagles. They have drafted Dillard last year. So I think you could have a few different options at left tackle. I would go with whichever one of those guys is going to be the cheapest. It sounds like Costanzo is not retiring. He's going to stay with the Colts. Peters will be a free agent and will be available for us. So I think Beachum is the younger, cheaper option that I would like to go to because you can't guarantee that you're going to have a left tackle available there at 11. So I would err on the side of trying to keep him if it was a cheaper contract, and I think that's probably where most of us fall. I guess we'll throw Robbie Anderson's name out there. We've been talking about him a little bit over the last few shows. Robbie Anderson, of course, still in talks with the Jets. There's no definitive separation imminent, but I think a lot of us feel like we're probably going to walk away from him. I think he's going to get a little bit more money. David, I'll throw it to you first. What do you think about Robbie Anderson?
I want to bring him back for continuity purposes. He's Sam Darnold's best weapon. He's a 6'3", 190-pound deep threat. Very, very quick. Obviously trying to become more than that one-trick pony, and an undrafted free agent out of Temple. The money is obviously going to be an interesting factor. I like to see what kind of negotiations Joe Douglas maintains with Robbie Anderson, especially if there's a case where Mari Cooper gets tagged or Emmanuel Sanders and AJ Green re-sign. Then Robbie Anderson becomes the number one free agent wide receiver on the market, and the bidding war is going to be outrageous. So I would like to bring back Robbie Anderson, especially if you get Sam in offensive line. That connection could continue to grow and grow and grow, especially throughout Sam Darnold's career.
I tend to agree on that. Matt, what are you thinking in terms of Robbie?
I want to bring him back. He's a young, versatile deep threat who is on the field a bunch. Like if you look at the Texans and Will Fuller, he's effective for them, but he just never plays. Robbie Anderson is very rarely hurt. I think he can be even more productive with Sam Darnold taking that leap in year 3. I want to bring him back.
Green Bean, over to you now.
Yeah, that's actually something interesting that was brought to my attention maybe yesterday or some. Robbie Anderson's health is a major factor that we tend to overlook a lot of the time with these wide receivers. I would love to bring Robbie back. That would be plan A for me. If he's going to get $15 million a year, it just doesn't make long-term sense to do it, but I'm hoping he comes back. It was encouraging to hear Douglas today saying that he was at least in the plans, so we'll see. But I would bring him back.
That's something interesting that I think hasn't been touched on enough is the health. And Robbie Anderson's been available for I think 97% of the games. It's something that shouldn't be balked at. I definitely like that aspect. I'm with you guys. I think if I can get Robbie for under $12 million a year, I'm bringing him back. If he's looking for that 13 to 15, I think that's probably where I say, hey, let's try with Perriman. Let's try with some other potential free agents. Let's keep it with wide receivers. Demaryius Thomas, a little bit older, longer in the tooth. What do you think, Green Bean, with Thomas?
$2 million a year, bring him back without guaranteed kind of thing. Let's see how the training camp goes. I think I would probably bring him back on a real cheap deal. If he's trying to get one more payday, he can walk. David,
over to you.
Sorry, I missed that. What was the player?
We're talking about Demaryius Thomas.
Demaryius Thomas, that's another source of continuity for Sam. I mean, you brought him in from the Patriots, and you're like, okay, that's definitely a skeptical trade, but he kind of showed how serviceable he was for Sam. He's a veteran wide receiver with experience. He's obviously past his prime now, and with possibly younger options out there that you can get possibly in the draft with this loaded wide receiver draft class, I don't think it would make sense to bring back Demaryius Thomas long term. But he could be another source of short continuity for Sam if the Jets can't really get anything else going at wide receiver.
Matt, what do you think about Thomas?
I'd cut him. I don't think he really serves that much of a purpose. He's a veteran for Sam Darnold, but you just brought on Josh Doxson, who could basically serve that role. He's younger. Yes, he maybe isn't on the field as much, was hurt and then cut last year, but I don't want to bring Demaryius Thomas back. He's not a long-term solution here.
I think I'd be okay with Demaryius on a 1-year contract, kind of like Green Bean said, a 2-year deal. He was on a 3-year deal last year. Granted, that was coming off an injury, so if he's looking for more than that, I'd probably just walk away. I would like the continuity with Sam, given the amount of receivers we're going to wind up losing. We're losing Robbie Anderson. We're probably going to lose Quincy Enunwa. I don't think he'll ever play again. Bellamy could be cut. And then if we let Thomas walk, we're really going in kind of fresh here, especially with Herndon not playing last year. Next player up, Brian Poole. I think we can probably all agree we want him back, but Matt, I'll throw it to you first, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, 100%. He was arguably Mike McCagnon's best free agent signing. Yes, bring him back.
I agree. David, what do you think?
I'm bringing him back 100%. He filled in as our best corner, and you get a couple more legitimate corners, and you put him back in the slot where he belongs. There you go.
Green Bean, up to you.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I want to say the good news about Quincy Enunwa is even though he's never going to play for us again, at least we still have to pay him and he's on the cap.
That's the biggest thing because he's got that injury guarantee, and I don't know if that prevents us from actually cutting him if he can't pass a physical by the 5th day of the new league year or whatever it is. That could be a real big issue for the Jets if we can't cut him and we have to pay him. I think it's $7.8 million or something like that in addition.
Whoa.
So that could really be a wrench in the system if we can't move on from him.
That's a risky thing to do.
It is.
Final gift.
That was Mike McCagnon, a big old FU. That's what he's saying.
What it was. Take that.
Mike McClownin.
Oh, seriously. That's a bad joke. Okay, we're talking Ty Montgomery. I would like to bring back Ty Montgomery. I don't know what he'd cost on a 1-year deal, but I think it's something that I'd like to play with. I just don't know if they're going to want to bring him back with how little they used him last year. Matt, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, I just don't think they utilized him, and I don't think they bring him back. I would look at a mid-round draft pick in order to be his second replacement.
David, what about you? What do you think?
I would like to negotiate with Ty Montgomery, but just the way they use him, I think they heavily misuse him, and I don't think Adam Gase is going to want to bring him back, which is mind-boggling. And he liked Bilal Powell better. So now my question to you guys is, if you were to re-sign one of the two, would you rather bring back Bilal Powell or Ty Montgomery?
Ooh.
Curveball right there.
Yeah, it is a curveball. I think if the money's the same and the duration of contract is the same, I like Powell a lot. I would like to bring back, I think, Montgomery just because I think there's maybe a higher upside at this point. Green Bean, what do you think about it?
Well, I think the big positive for Montgomery last year was all the potential ways we could use him in wide receiver sets, or maybe him and Bell on the field at the same time. We did none of that. So I think when you're only looking at him being a backup running back, he's not all that good. I don't care to keep him. I will say he actually commented to me last night on Instagram, so it hurts me to say that.
That's very cool. Matt, anything to add about the Powell Montgomery?
As I think the self-proclaimed biggest Bilal Powell fan on Twitter, I am taking Bilal Powell.
I cannot blame you. Let's get into two more guys real quick. Alex Lewis, obviously we brought him in. I think it was the Ravens we brought him in from. I would like to bring him back. I think a 1-year contract would probably be the best route there. I think he has earned at least the right to compete. I don't think he'll be asking for anything crazy. David, I'll throw it to you first. Alex Lewis, would you bring him back or let him go?
I would bring him back as a depth signing. I think you could get him on a cheaper rate. He's probably going to cost a little more money, especially if he filled in at the starter role. But he was a serviceable guard nonetheless. Committed way too many holding penalties. And I would actually consider if you bring in another guard in the draft, that could be another spot where you could have competition for. So if you bring in a Joe Thuney and then you have an Alex Lewis and another piece of competition there at that other guard spot, then by all means bring him back on a pretty solid deal.
Green Bean, what do you think?
3 years, $4 million per. Love him on the team. Backup. If he, just like David said, he can battle for the job. If he wins, he wins. If not, we know what we have in him. I think he's about as good of a backup as you're going to find. I'm fine with it. Like him.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I like him a lot too. I'd bring him back. I think he's going to be one of the starting guards. Ultimately here, I think Winters gets cut, even though for some reason Joe Douglas is pumping his tires pretty hard today. And I think they sign a guard in free agency. So I bring back Lewis to be one of my starters.
I agree. I think Beachum and Lewis, or at least Lewis plus, free agent left tackle, is probably who I want to head into the draft with. I would ideally like to get someone at 11. Last player on this list, let's talk about Jordan Jenkins, the outside linebacker for us, had a high in sacks this year. Would you guys bring him back or let him walk? Matt, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, I want to bring him back. He's basically like Calvin Pace light. He's a really good edge setter. He's not someone who's going to rack up a bunch of sacks, but I think he's a nice complementary outside linebacker and starter, and probably one of Mike McCagnon's better mid-round finds. I want to bring him back for sure.
David, what do you think about Jenkins?
Well, I agree with you, Matt. This is probably one of Mike McCagnon's best draft picks, period. I mean, you got to say what you got to say about that. But he's continuing to grow as a pass rusher. He's definitely a very serviceable building block that you can have on the roster. I think he wants to come back as a Jet long term. Of course, like any other free agent, he'll probably test the market, but honestly, I don't think the market is going to be insanely large for him. I think the Jets are going to find a way to bring him back, and I think they're going to have a mutual interest, and I think he will come back, and he should. And you get another pass rusher next to Jordan Jenkins. I think you got a pretty decent combo right there.
What are you thinking, Green Bean?
I'm just thinking, I can't believe that we're going to keep Winters. That blows my mind. I mean, that was next to Trumaine Johnson. That was my firmest cut. But anyway, yeah, as far as Jordan Jenkins, most of his sacks are coverage sacks. He's not the guy blowing the lineman up and, overpowering him to a sack, but he does get them. And the thing that he does best is he sets the edge. Part of that number one run D, that's him. He has a major he's a major factor in that. I like him, but if he's wanting 10, 11, 12 million, I think Matt said it best. He's very reminiscent of Calvin Pace light. I think, and I loved Calvin Pace. So I want to keep him, but he's somebody I would have my cap on him. Say, look, this is what we can pay you, man. Take it or leave it.
That's kind of where I fall as well. I like Jordan Jenkins. I would like to bring him back as a role player. I think he did well for us this past year. I do think a lot of his sacks were coverage sacks, and I think pass rush wise, he's maybe one of the weaker potential options in terms of free agency. But I don't know if I would have called him maybe a Calvin Pace. Maybe Brian Thomas is probably more about where I was kind of thinking where he'd be. But edge setter, I agree. Very important for this number one run defense. I think I agree with you guys across the board. If we can get him maybe $8 to $10 million. I mean, $10 million might be a little bit too much for me, but I think I would definitely like to bring him back on some sort of reasonable contract. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Before I do that, guys that are new to the chat, we have a link in the description down below for the Jets Discord server if you want to join that. We have a question of the day. The question, whoever gets it right, I'm going to pick, I'm going to kind of raffle the correct answers. Whoever gets it right, go over to the Jets Discord server. It's the poll option that you'll see there. Which Jets wide receiver was the first NFL player to reach 10,000 receiving yards? Head over to the Jets Discord, select on the poll option, and then vote on that. And then you can get yourself entered to win a hat or a shirt or a mug or something like that. Let's move on to our next topic of the night. We're talking NFL CBA rumors. Now that we are in this part of the season, we are starting to talk and hear a little bit about the leaks coming out of the CBA negotiations. One of those leaks that we have kind of heard about is the 17-game schedule. Now, that 17-game schedule, I believe, would eliminate one of the preseason games to start. I mean, I think the players could go back and probably say, hey, we want to lose 2 preseason games. But the idea is it's a 17-game schedule. The players would get an extra game check up to a certain amount. So the top-end players actually don't benefit from this extra game. The lower-end players that are having smaller per-game contract checks, they'll have the same contract kind of go forward. And then the other change that is really notable is the 7-team format for the playoffs. 7 teams for the AFC, 7 teams for the NFC. That would allow for 1 first-round bye, and it would allow for 3 games on Saturday and 3 games on Sunday for Wild Card Weekend. Green Bean, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts on the new CBA leaks?
Well, let me just say, if you guys haven't listened to Matt's new podcast, you need to. It's great, Just Jets. But I'm going to disagree with most of what he said on that podcast. I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. Very well stated, and the reasoning behind it is sound. Me personally, I love an extra team in the playoffs, partially because it just means we're one drip closer to actually getting in there. But I do like it. There's many years that I feel like there was a team that got hot at the end of the year and they just miss it by the skin of their teeth. And it would have been really cool to see what kind of damage they would have done in the playoffs. I like that. I also think the bye week is, for 2 teams to get, or 4 teams really, to get the bye week. I think it's too much of an advantage. I like it that it's only 1 team, the best team, gets a bye week. And look, the preseason. I actually enjoy preseason more than most, but I do get it. And 1 more real game a season. I think it's high time. There was a time when there were only 14 games a year, so we changed to 16 games. There was a time when there was no bye week. I think it's the natural evolution. I like it a lot. I'm psyched about it.
I think one thing I wanted to add to that was that the the 17 game schedule, if they were to add maybe a second bye week where you can have that Thursday night game come after a bye week so that way teams aren't playing on short rest, that would be really interesting to me. I know the NFL has always wanted to get the Super Bowl on President's Weekend, so adding that extra week to the season sort of gets us there. If they do eliminate one preseason game, that does move the season back to Labor Day weekend. So you would start on Labor Day weekend and on President's Weekend, and hopefully 2 bye weeks. David, let's get your thoughts on the new CBA talks.
Well, breaking news on NFL.com stating that the owners and the NFLPA reps actually concluded the CBA meeting. There's not really any further comments at that time, but it was a long 4-hour meeting discussing the new proposed CBA rules. But to be honest with the CBA rules, originally I found it confusing, but now that I kind of think about it, after listening to what Green Bean said, I would have to agree with him, especially since this 7-team playoff rule would have actually worked for us about 4 or 5 years ago when we just fell short against the Buffalo Bills. So it's definitely a great opportunity for more teams to actually get into the playoffs. I actually like that there's more opportunities given for teams to make the playoffs. In regards to the 17-game schedule, that one I actually didn't see coming. I actually like the 16-game schedule. I think it's most even that way. But however, anything to get rid of another preseason game.
Matt, let's throw it over to you. I know you discussed it a little bit on that podcast we were just talking about. Give everyone here who hasn't seen it your insight.
Yeah, absolutely, and appreciate all the plugs, guys. I am not a fan of it, and the main reason is I think how the NFL has it set up right now is actually perfect. I think that the 2 teams in each conference with the bye week, the 2 wild cards, I think it's a perfect amount, and if you do anything more than that, it's going to start to get too watered down, I think. Yeah, there's sometimes outliers where you see like the NFC East have a team sneak in at like 8-8, 9-7 as a division winner. But if you're adding in an essential 7th seed, I don't know how much I love that. The 17-game schedule, I don't know. I'm kind of just old-fashioned, I guess. I like how it is now. I don't like change, and I just want to keep it the way it is. It's perfect. They're printing money. Why change anything?
So I'll kind of give you my insight on it. I tend to agree with Matt for most of this. I do like the scheduling aspect as far as getting it on Labor Day and having it on Super Bowl on President's Weekend. But I think the 16-game schedule has just been so nice in terms of a scheduling where you have 4 teams from the AFC, 4 teams from the NFC. You have your division, 6 games, and then you get the 2 divisions within the conference that you're play of. So the Jets, the AFC. You get the 2 other division opponents that finish at the same ranking. So if the Jets finish second, we might play the AFC West team that finished second place or whatever. So I think that's really cool. I think that's a good aspect to what the current system is. I do have concern about the watered down regular season with the 7 or with the 2 extra wildcard teams. Yes, that would definitely help us in terms of, 2015 when we could have gotten in. But I think if you degrade the regular season too much, that turns into a kind of like the NBA season. That's the one thing I don't like about that is there's so many teams that get into the playoffs in the NBA that it really doesn't feel like the regular season means much. And I think that's where you see the excitement in college football, where there's only 4 teams that get into the playoffs. I think if they expand it to an 8-team thing, I think they could probably still do it all right. But as far as the NFL goes, adding that extra team, look, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to be excited for it. It's going to create a ton of money around the sport. So ultimately, it's going to happen. I think it's going to be, added in. I do like that the extra or the top seed in each conference gets that bye, and it's way more beneficial to be the best team in your conference as opposed to the top 2 teams that may not have even played each other. So I think that first seed is probably pretty important there. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure where I want to see this go. The other thing they kind of brought up was that the players are going to be getting 51% of the revenue share. That's up from, I believe it's 50%. So I don't know the exact number that they're projected to get, but the NFL players are projected to get a lot more money in this new CBA, which kind of affects what we might do with Jamal Adams. I don't know if we're going to make a move in terms of signing anyone. I don't know if the Cowboys will. The Cowboys are probably going to wait on trying to sign Dak because of the CBA talks. I don't know what that could potentially mean for the future of contracts in the NFL.
Yeah, they say that's why a lot of transition tags and people haven't made decisions. They're like trying to. They actually just authorized an extension,
Yep.
right? Because they want to wait and see what happens. We haven't gotten much on that. I'm real curious to see how it goes.
Oh yeah.
See what happens there.
Anyone have anything extra to add for this?
I just don't love also the week 17 the players check thing. It's like what it's
Yeah.
capped at a really ridiculously low number. I don't think that's fair to the players either. I think they're definitely going to have to renegotiate that if they're going to add a 17th game.
What was that? I'm not sure what that is.
So the 17th game that they'd play, there was a cap on how much money that final game check would be. And most players are probably all right with it, but it's the higher end players that don't get the benefit of having don't have the benefit of getting what they should be paid per game. They'd actually wind up losing money by playing that extra game. So players like, I think Jamal Adams had a tweet about a 17 game schedule, and then he wound up taking it down because it wasn't like great for the NFL Players Association. You don't want to back yourselves into a corner by having guys get paid less. If anything, if they're adding a 17th game, everyone across the board should be getting that 17th game check for what they signed their contract for.
Right. Interesting.
Kind of my thinking on that. It says that we're going to run out of time on my little Zoom window. I did just get the upgraded plan, so it should be all right. If we wind up dropping these guys in here, give us 2 seconds. I'll invite them back in, but we're not going to be done in the 3 minutes that this little emergency window says. All right. So, do we have any more thoughts on the CBA rumors at this point? Nope. Negative. All right. We'll move on to our next topic, wide receiver trade rumors. Before I do that, guys, if you're new to the stream, check out the description down below. There's a link to the Jets Discord server. If you want a chance to win a shirt or a mug or a hat or something like that from the Jets Talk store, we are going to give away one of these at the end of the show. The question of the day, which Jets wide receiver was the first NFL player to reach 10,000 receiving yards? Head over to the Jets Discord. There's a link, and then on the side it says poll. Just head over to that area and vote for the poll question. You'll see it in that thread. All right, guys, we are talking about wide receiver trade rumors. There have been a lot of rumors over the last few weeks. The most prominent one, I think all of us have probably made a video on at this point, was the Odell Beckham Jr. potential trade. So before I get too far into it, Green Bean, what did you think about the potential rumors of Odell wanting to come back to New York and play for the Jets?
Well, I think that, whenever you have an anonymous source talking on the condition of anonymity to somebody, we don't know who he is and all that, I find it difficult to believe that conversation ever happened. I will say, too, that even if he did say he wants to go back, he wants to go to the New York Jets, I would actually think it's more about being in the New York market spotlight than, there's no real good reason why someone would say they want to play here right now. So I don't know. As far as him coming, I've been vacillating back and forth. I was staunchly against it. I started to listen to some people's opinions, and it kind of, I warmed a bit. I think I'm still leaning towards no, but I don't even believe it happened, man. So,
David, what do you think about the Odell potential?
Well, I'm sure you three already know my stance on that.
Oh yeah, the group chat was blowing up as soon as we started firing darts at you. But yeah, tell the fans out there what you're thinking as far as Odell goes.
Well, I like the talent, and of all players, let alone Odell Beckham Jr., I'm shocked that a player like him would actually consider wanting to play in an offense like Adam Cokehead, Crackhead Gaze. It's kind of hilarious, but honestly, though, I know he's coming off an injury. You have to pick up that big contract, and you'd probably have to give up a considerable amount of capital for him. And we're not exactly in position to be giving up that kind of capital, picking up a big contract when you want to address the offensive line, you want to address other needs. So I wouldn't want to have a guy that's probably 10 times a crybaby. I wouldn't want to be paying probably what is it?
Whoop. Hold up, guys. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, guys. Let me just get these guys back into the chat. I told you that was going to happen. we're gonna get all these. I upgraded to what I needed to. I gotta text Matt, let him get in here. Yeah, so we're talking about the Jets wide receiver trade options here, and what could potentially be. What's up, Green Bean? Let me try to get Matt and David back in here. Let me get your thoughts. What are you thinking about the trade market with Odell? If you can help me out a little bit here.
Me?
Yeah, I know you were just. We're live. We are on the screen. We're just a little discombobulated right now because we're waiting for those extra windows to pop up.
Okay. Well, here's the thing with Odell Beckham. It's it may be difficult to court legitimately great free agents. So if you're thinking that you want to try to get guys at his level, trading for them may be the only way to do it. Because we're going to have difficulty courting some of these guys that we want. Conklin, Thuney, and Ngakwe. We have all these beautiful plans, but I don't think any of them are going to come here unless we overpay them. And Beckham's contract is 14.5 and then 14 and 14. I think that's the way it is. That's not bad for a number one receiver. And he is getting older. So who knows? Maybe he's maturing a little bit. He didn't cause that many problems in Cleveland last year.
All right, so Matt and David, I apologize. We dropped the chat for a second. I just went back to Green Bean just to get a few more thoughts on the Odell situation. David, I know you were saying that you were not a huge fan of the antics and everything like that. What was your final determination? You did not want him?
I didn't honestly. Well, before I cut off, I don't want him. I just don't think we're an Odell Beckham Jr. away from competing. We have way too many holes on the roster, and personally, I think you could go probably a lot cheaper instead of Odell Beckham, where you don't have to give up a considerable amount of draft capital, pick up a huge contract for a diva.
So Matt, I want to get your opinion now. What do you think about Odell?
Depending on the cost, I would trade for him. I don't want to give up a first round pick, but if the cost was a second round pick, I would do it so quick. And the reason for that is considering his talent and what wide receivers are going to be getting paid. Like Amari Cooper is going to get what, 18, 19 million dollars a year easily, and Odell is 15 to 16 million dollar range on the cap. You get a real wide receiver one, and I'm really tired of this like building the culture argument or conversation that comes up every year. Winning builds culture, and you need to score points in this league. You can't win with the 31st ranked offense, and I don't know. I'm trading for him. I'm getting him in here. I don't care about the other antics and stuff like that. Just score points and let's have fun, please.
All right, so that's kind of where I fall. I fall somewhere between Matt and Green Bean on this, I think. I like the contract. He's actually, because you don't have to pay out the signing bonus portion of that contract, it was already paid out by the Browns. We would actually only be on the hook for $14 million a year, so it's 4 years at about $14 million each season. When you think about Robbie Anderson and him wanting $13 to $15 million, I would definitely prefer Odell over Robbie. I do think the antics are a little bit of a concern. I would definitely not give up the first overall or first round draft pick, number 11, because you can get Jerry Jeudy, you can get CeeDee Lamb at that pick, so it doesn't make sense to use that on a wide receiver. You use it on tackle. For a second or third round pick, I think is where I'm okay with it. Now, the issue that I have with this, and the reason I don't think it's going to happen, is because there was a moment last year before the Jets-Browns game early in the season where Odell came out and said that Greg Williams went out and tried to injure Odell while Odell was on the Giants playing a preseason game against the Browns. And obviously Greg Williams is our defensive coordinator. I don't think the Jets want to bring that kind of animosity into the locker room. That seems like it's sort of plutonium. I wouldn't want to touch that. But, I mean, if we are talking from a skill set, what Green Bean was saying before about the Jets not being a desirable landing place, and we are going to need to have other options outside of just free agency if we want to rebuild this offense. And Matt hit on it. We need talent. We need to make this team fun. Odell would absolutely do that. He is an elite level wide receiver when he's healthy. Yes, he's been a little bit injury prone the last few years, but I think there's enough potential there that with a second or third round pick, I think you absolutely have to make that move.
Or they could just have Greg Williams and Odell talk it out. Greg Williams would punch him in the face and just end it.
Just punch him in the mouth. I don't know. I've seen Odell's fighting moves against that kicking net, and I'm pretty sure that he might be able to take Greg Williams. I'm
I don't know.
like,
Kicking that seemed to get the better of him.
that's what it looked like. All right, let's talk about some other guys that are potentially trade options out there. Another big one is going to be Alshon Jeffrey, the wide receiver from the Eagles. Now, the connection here is that Joe Douglas, obviously from the Eagles, knows Alshon Jeffrey. Adam Gase played or was the offensive coordinator for Alshon Jeffrey in Chicago back in 2015. So the two of them have a connection. So obviously this is going to be something. Jets need a wide receiver. Eagles are strapped for cash right now. Could the Jets potentially facilitate a trade? Now, the issue I have with this isn't so much the contract, because his signing bonus was a little wonky. So we actually get him for pretty cheap if we sign him or if we trade for him. It would be $10 million this year, and I think it's $12 or $13 million next year. But you'd be able to cut him after this year if you wanted to. So I think that's an interesting option for the Jets. The issue here is that the Eagles actually lose just under $1 million if they trade him. So it makes no sense in that respect for them, unless they were trying to potentially free up cap space for next year while also getting a draft pick this year. But I don't think it's going to cost a whole heck of a lot. When you look back at 2000, I think it was 15 when we traded for Brandon Marshall. He was 30 or 31 years old. We gave up a fifth-round pick, or we gave up, what did we get? We gave up a fifth-round pick, and we got Marshall and a seventh-round pick. So I think that's sort of reminiscent to that style of trade, where I think it could definitely benefit us, but it depends what you have to give up. If you give up a late-round pick, I think you make that move. Matt, I'll throw it to you. I know you were a little critical of that potential signing, I think.
Yeah, I don't like that idea at all. I think that he is well past his productive days. I think if this was 5 years ago, yeah, this is probably a different story. And I know I would obviously cost more to get him at that point, but he can't stay on the field. He hasn't eclipsed 800 yards in a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. I think you would just be bringing in another like Demaryius Thomas like option here. Which, if you want to do that, then sign Demaryius Thomas for $2 million and don't give up any draft picks and then take on that cap hit.
David, what are you thinking?
I personally wouldn't like that idea either. I mean, Alshon Jeffrey I interact with a lot of Eagles fans, and they do not like Alshon Jeffrey. They're looking to get rid of him for that specific reason. The dude can't stay on the field. Apparently, there's rumors going around that he was the one that was bashing Carson Wentz or whatever the hell that was. So he's definitely kind of an interesting character. And you also have to pick up that contract. Now, I know like you want to pick up as much as you would pick up for Odell, and maybe you wouldn't trade for much, but he's 31 years old, and it would be almost like trade for that Brandon Marshall, or it would almost be like picking up that Demaryius Thomas option. I would not do it at all.
Green Bean, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, there's little else to be said. I think it's a silly move. I don't see the redeeming qualities in making that trade. I mean, it's like you're trying to see if Alshon Jeffrey from 4 years ago can show up, and I just don't see it.
I think that's sort of where I fall as well. I would prefer not to make this trade. Of the potential trade targets out there, this is probably my least enthusiastic. I think if it was a late round pick, like a sixth round pick, I might consider it. It really depends on how much money we're going to be able to spend. Last year, I was very critical on the Jets cap situation. We had like $100 million in cap space last year, and I said we're not going to have enough free agents come in here for us to spend all that money on free agency. And we went into the season with about $20 million in cap space before we, brought in Khalil. So I think if there's cap space to be had, Alshon Jeffrey is a very different receiver from what we currently have in our stable. I think he's a big-bodied receiver that could be a red zone target for Sam. But at $10 million a year, $13 million, whatever, I don't think I can sign off on that. I think that's a little too rich for me. I think, like these guys have said, Demaryius Thomas would be a better option for a lower price point at this particular juncture. Now, the next player I want to get into is one that I think is a little more interesting for us, and we haven't been tied to him per se, but there have been rumors about him going around since about October, and that is Stefon Diggs. His contract, very favorable as well. I want to say it's 4 years, $12 million a year is what you'd wind up getting him for. So again, like if you talk about the Robbie contract, potentially getting $13 to $15 million a year, signing a Stefon Diggs to bring in as your star wide receiver is not the worst option. Green Bean, I'll throw it to you first. What are you thinking about Stefon Diggs?
Well, I mean, first, what are you going to have to give up? I mean, he's not in any sort of. The only problem with him is that for some reason he doesn't want to play up there. I mean, that guy's. I mean, he's a great receiver. I would love to have him on the Jets, but I don't know. I mean, they're probably going to be seeking a number one pick. I would think, right? I mean, I might be wrong there. I think that's what they're going to want for a first round pick. Hell no. I just don't want to give up our first round pick. But I would consider the trade if we can get creative, maybe an Avery Williamson and something like that. If that would interest them, maybe. But I don't see us pulling that one off. It's going to be too rich.
David, what do you think about Stefan Diggs?
I like the player. I mean, he's a very well-rounded receiver, and
Yeah.
usually I'm not the biggest, at least right now, I'm not the biggest fan of giving up picks. But Stefan Diggs would probably be my best option if I were to do it, especially since I think the contract is, what'd you say, was 12 million, 13 million a year?
I think it's 4 years, 12 million a year. He's 26 years old too, so he's young.
Exactly. So like, there's kind of a lot you're getting out of for Stefan Diggs, but I think the Vikings are looking for a premium. And like I said with the Odell Beckham trade, we're not in position to be giving up a first round pick for a guy like Stefan Diggs. Sure, it'll fill up our receiver hole immensely, but I'd rather use our first round pick on the offensive line primarily. And I think we have the best chance to land a stellar offensive lineman with that first round pick. And I wouldn't want to give that away for a player that Sam probably wouldn't even be able to work with if he's still running for his life back there. Because at the end of the day, no matter what receiver you got, your quarterback's got to be protected. Otherwise, he can't get the ball to him. So stick to the offensive line. Stefan Diggs, negotiate with it. I would definitely do that. I would definitely consider that as my best option to negotiate with, but it's too risky to do that.
Matt, what are your thoughts on the situation?
I would do it if it's for a second rounder. Or absolutely, I don't want to give up a first round pick for just about anybody. There'd be very few people I'd give up a first round pick for. Diggs though is probably the best option of those three receivers. I would think he's a little younger than Odell, has a little bit less headaches than what Odell brings, but he would be a phenomenal ad for the Jets if you're able to get him for a second, and I would do it for that, but not a first.
Now, let's throw out the potential situation of, well, I'll say this first. I like Stefan Diggs a lot. 26 years old, elite receiver, has been hampered a little bit by the weapons that are on the Vikings team. Vikings are right up against the cap, so they're going to want draft capital in terms of compensation. But I wonder if there is a situation where, now I'd have to look, I think the Vikings are picking in like the mid to late 20s, but if there was a situation where the Jets could fall back to their pick, like maybe it was a swap of picks that got that trade done, I think I'd be okay with that. I think, I mean, obviously I want tackle first, so maybe you wait till draft day, see who's available. If you're thinking about taking a wide receiver and, you know, maybe Diggs is the guaranteed type of player and you want to swap back and then you take someone a little bit later, maybe that's an option. I was thinking for a second round pick and then maybe a conditional pick next year might be able to get that done. It might be a little more appealing to me. I agree with Matt. I do not want to give up the number 11 pick. Same thing with Green Bean and David, what you guys were saying. I think there's too much value in CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy with that cheap rookie contract. I think there's a lot of potential there. Is there any sort of trade scenario where the Jets were to fall back maybe to the middle 20s? Would you do that to get Stefan Diggs? Matt, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea, and I would highly consider it. I believe the Vikings picked 25, so maybe if you move back to 25, I think I'm blanking on his name, but the tackle from Houston might be available at that point. Or if he's off the board, then
Austin
maybe
Jackson, maybe.
It's something
Well,
like
Austin Jackson's the USC.
Jones.
Yeah, it's Josh
Right.
Jones.
Josh Jones.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you. He could potentially be available there, or if he's off the board, maybe you go with the center from Wisconsin or what's Ruiz, I think, from Michigan, and maybe go a little bit interior offensive line in the later first round. But if you're doing that and addressing wide receiver one like Stefan Diggs, then I think I would do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that if you trade for Diggs, you're not spending your second or first round receiver or round pick on a wide receiver. You've already got that guy locked in for 4 years on a pretty good deal. So I don't think that – I think you're solving that wide receiver one, and then you're probably bringing in an additional free agent wide receiver, whether that be a Brashad Perriman to be the burner over the top, or maybe a Funchess, or one of those lower end maybe wide receivers to play that second wide receiver role. David, I want to hear from you. Would you fall back to the mid-20s if given the opportunity to get Stefan Diggs?
I I would 100%. I mean, there could still be some. You're getting your wide receiver one. There's still considerable options at offensive line. You may not be getting the top tackle, but you could still hit two. I think you could still hit two birds with one stone in a sense, to where you're addressing your number one receiver and you're getting a considerable serviceable offensive lineman, possibly in the first round. And then once you have your number one receiver, you wouldn't really need to address wide receiver in the second and third round, because once you kill two birds with one stone with that potential trade, you could possibly have more options in the second and third round. You could probably get another tackle or a guard. You could probably even get another receiver, and you could have a dynamic receiving duo there. So if the Vikings were to actually put Stephon Diggs in the 25th pick to move up to 11, I'm taking that in a heartbeat. The amount of options you could get after that 25th pick, I'm all in.
All right, so we got 123 people in this chat, which means we have just enough to hit 100 likes on this video. So you guys better like this video, because if I get 100 likes on the next 4 live streams that I do, my buddy Mario from #Sports, who's in the chat right now, so sub up his channel if you want to hear any decent Buffalo Bills stuff. But if you want to hit that like button, if we get 4 live streams in a row of 100 likes, I get to put Mario through a table at one of the Jets-Bills games next year. So
Let's do it.
So this is something we definitely want to do. So make sure you hit the like button if you want to do that. Green Bean, what are you thinking? Would you trade back to 25 to get Stephon Diggs?
Well, I really do think we should wait and see who's there. Like, I think Andrew Thomas would be too much for me, but if he's taken, you're still going to be able to get maybe Josh Jones, Austin Jackson, or Pert, who are good left tackles, man. And in most other drafts, they'd be around the top guys in the draft. It's only this draft that those guys are at the back of the first and early second. So I think if you're going to take care of wide receiver number 1 and get a solid left tackle, I think you have to consider that. I would do it in about 15 seconds. I'd ask for a 6th too. But
I like it. I get greedy on that too. Look, I think there's I like Stephon Diggs. I would like to maybe you could get something else thrown in. I don't know offhand what the trade value chart values that kind of leap up as, but I would imagine that's about a first round pick's worth of talent to get up that far. It would be interesting for me. I think I would probably do it for Stephon Diggs. That's probably the only player I would do it for. Another player I want to bring up, and it's not something that I've really heard thrown around, but it's just something I just sort of wanted to spitball. Robert Woods from the Rams. They have Cooks under contract, and they can't cut or trade him without hurting themselves salary cap wise. And Cooper Kupp is their main guy over there. So is there a way that Robert Woods shakes free? I think you'd have to give up a pretty good amount for him. I think you'd have to give up a second-round pick. I don't foresee him as necessarily a number 1 wide receiver, but his cap hits, I want to say, are like $5 million and $9 million the next 2 years. You're under contract for the next 2 years. You get a really nice contract there. Green Bean, I'll throw it to you first. What would you think about possibly giving up maybe a second-round pick for a Robert Woods?
I don't know. I think I value seconds almost like I do first. So and that may be a little bit too much, but I love what's in this draft this year, in the second round. Guys like, Justin Jefferson might not make it back there, but like Mims and that cheap rookie contract stuff, that's not to be undervalued. Like when you're talking about trying to build a team, and this draft is so deep, I would probably say, no. A third, okay, but I want my I don't know. I want my center. I want my big 6'4" wide receivers with that are going to be $1 million a year. I want that stuff out of this draft. It's the draft to do it, so I struggle with it. That's the first time I thought about that one. It's interesting.
David, what do you think about that?
Robert Woods is definitely a very underrated player, especially with the team like the Rams. But you look at what he's got around him on that offense. When you have guys like Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks, and even Todd Gurley, he kind of fits into a pretty balanced offense here. So I think it's just a matter of him fitting into the right offense, and giving up a second-round pick for a guy who's really just used to playing in these balanced offenses, and then you would have to expect him to kind of fill that number one role when you're giving up a draft pick, which you could use on a younger, cheaper receiver. It's kind of a little bit of a risky move, like a little bit. So I think it'd just be a big adjustment for Robert Woods to kind of just go from an offense where you have legitimate playmakers to go to an offense where you have to kind of fulfill that duty as a number one receiver role. So you're kind of playing a little risk ball with that trade.
What do you think about it, Matt? Robert Woods for a draft pick.
That was actually in one of my semi-older videos, like a couple months ago.
That's where I heard it from.
I'm pretty sure I might have said a third originally, but I think I would do it for a second too. He seems to fit Adam Gase's mold for what he likes to do in the offense, like smaller receiver who can get open in space and stuff like that. No, he's not your prototypical number one, but if you trade, let's say a third, because you have 2 third-round picks. So let's call it a third. You have Crowder in the slot, and then maybe you take a day 2 wide receiver in either the second or the third round. I could start to get behind that receiving core.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm for it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I fall as well. And hashtag, or I don't know if it's Mario or Paul that's in there. I think it's Mario. He's saying that he would cost more than a second-round pick, which is possible. And I think that's probably where I think all of us would probably cut off this. None of us are willing to give up the number 11 overall pick for a wide receiver. Guys, it was a lot of fun. If you have not answered the question down below, sorry, it's too late. We're going to, guys in the chat, give me the first 3 people to give me 10 numbers, or I guess list a number under 10, and then I'll pick someone who won. We had 9 people get this correct. 3, 7, let's see, 7. All right, so we got 14, 15, 16, 17. So 17. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right. So the question of the day was, which Jets wide receiver was the first NFL player to reach 10,000 receiving yards? That would be Don Maynard. And our winner for this week is going to be Brady Potter. Get at me on the Jets Discord. Let me know your information so I can send you out a shirt or a mug or something like that. So thank you guys for coming on. We will definitely do this again. We had a little bit longer chat this time. Guys, do you want to say anything before we sign off? Green Bean, I'll throw it to you first.
I just want to say thanks. I like the longer format. It's nice to not have the same, time constraints. This was great. I love it. I love you guys. I love everybody.
David, any last words?
This is always fun, especially now we have twice the fun as it was twice the length. But definitely check out all these guys. They do a fantastic job. I love working with every one of them. You can check me out too at Gangrene David. I provide not only just insight like them, but I provide the experience too. I go to a lot of games and I provide that kind of content for you guys. And I go to a lot of events, so I provide that for you guys too. So you guys want the experience, check out my channel. But definitely give these guys a lot of credit too. They do a fantastic job.
Matt, any last words from you?
Yeah, I love doing this with you guys. It's a lot of fun to just sit back, relax, talk some New York Jets football. Episode 3 of Just Jets drops Monday. Recorded the interview today, so I'm not saying who it is, but make sure to tune in on Monday.
Oh man, I like it, guys. This is going to be the signature sign-off. Peace, love, and dope, boys. I will see you again next week.